Howdy, folks. Good morning. It is Monday, March 24th, and this is the OpenJS Security Collab Space slash working group. So, weekly meeting. Come if you're seeing this recorded, please come join us. We're a friendly group, and we have even some new people in this meeting today. So with that, to kind of get started, before hopping into the agenda I have for today, wanted to ask any others for walk-on items to discuss to make sure that we don't miss them and we can sequence them properly today. Nothing? Alrighty. Cool beans. So if that's the case, then let me bring up what we're going to talk about, which is the NPM best practices guide that we've been talking about for a little bit, and getting some items from there included into the security compliance guidelines for OpenJS. So let me bring that document up really quick. Mm, so I want to make sure I have a clean window to screen share with. Alrighty. So oh, here, let me go back a little bit. So, Jordan, in case you're up to date on this, as a quick refresher, there is the NPM best practices guide from OpenSSF that we have been talking about making some lot of having some inputs on, potentially using that as a basis for our secure release guideline document update, perhaps in the future. So one of the things that I did as a part of that and as a part of the NPM continuity policy work that was going on with the CPC, I put together a document trying to combine all of the documentation into a simple reference on NPM's account management system and the meeting notes. Oh, here. Meeting notes are right here, and the link I just dropped is the document itself. So here you go, and oop, hit that, and here you go. Um, and so the purpose of this document is twofold. One, to potentially be an input into the NPM best practices guide as a reference. And second, to inform updates to the security compliance guidelines for OpenJS. So with that, I went through yes last week. What happened was we had a great conversation with Chris. He highlighted that some of the documentation that this was based off of is just not completely accurate, unfortunately. So there were some NPM docs that there was some stuff around NPM teams, particularly the developers team, that was not 100% accurate based upon documentation. So updated that. I went back through the documentation again just to make sure like I didn't miss anything or if I had misinterpreted or misread stuff, but there wasn't anything else. So we have a few recommendations. I put together a series of recommendations, and I just before going too far into this, I really wanted to get your all's inputs on how out of line or crazy some of these were versus others so that we could insert intelligent ones into the compliance guidelines. Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Um, I don't see any reason to minimize the number of NPM organization members. Certainly, you want to minimize the number of owners, but you can have 1 million people in there as members, and as long as they're not on like the thing you want to minimize is access. So ownership, or there's privileges, ownership, but also the ability to publish packages. But you can have people who are members of organizations and don't have the ability to publish any packages, and there's no danger in that, so there's no reason to limit it.
This is a good question on the documentation here. Um, so please correct me if I'm wrong with what I'm about to say, because that would actually be helpful if I am
Mhm.
wrong. Is that anybody who's a member of an organization can create and publish a new package. If they're in a team is all that can be done to limit their ability to affect existing packages.
Um, I seem to recall that only admins, like org admins, can publish a new package, but uh, I'm not confident enough about it to say that that's for sure the case. So
Hmm.
that is a good point. We should determine that. Um, if it works the way you're suggesting, then that is a good reason to limit organization members. If it works the way I remember, then there's no reason to. Um,
Yeah, here, check this out. At least this is what the docs say here, is
hmm.
that anybody can create and publish packages,
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
but
then let's assume that the docs are correct here. If I'm interested, I can, or if anyone is interested, it can be verified independently. But then never
yeah,
mind.
actually, that would be
Given,
helpful. That would
yeah.
actually be really helpful to know because this isn't the first, this is an important distinction here. And if it turns out that this isn't completely correct, then
Mhm.
that changes things quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, yeah, let's just assume it's correct. It's yeah, I haven't run into that in a long time, so I don't know for sure.
All right, cool beans. Awesome. So, yeah, thank you for that, Jordan. That was actually really good. So, the idea based upon this then is, yeah, going back to this, minimizing the number of NPM organization members. I'll put a comment here as well.
So also, I was curious, just as an aside, about the developers team, and indeed, you cannot delete it anymore, but you used to be able to. So I have an org that has 0 teams, but
And
also,
are you just broken forever now, or
yes, there's no way to add a new team if you don't have the developers team. So that particular org is, I'd have to go ask NPM support to fix.
well done, sir.
Yeah.
That's funny. Um, yeah, a lot of this functionality seems like really interesting where it's been left. Actually, now that we have you here, Jordan, a question is, in your recollection, how much um, change has there been in these settings from your experience over time, or they've been pretty stable?
Um, in terms of the stuff that most people are going to be aware of and need to think about, it's been pretty stable. There have definitely been some niche edge cases that have shifted over the years, but um, yeah, nothing that we need to really be concerned with. The like, for example, the developers team, you can't delete it anymore. Like almost nobody deleted it, I'm assuming. So like, it didn't come up. There's a few other things. There's some weirdnesses about that I would will discuss when we're off the recording. There's some potential security issues, but the putting a package into your org is a good way to do the secure thing. I'll just say so. This advice doesn't need to account for it.
Okay, cool. Just I'm Ben, would you mind pausing really quick so we can hear what Jordan had to say, just in case? Because I'd love to hear that just to make sure
Yeah,
we
sure.
account for it. Because I have more detailed questions. So, um, these are the users you're talking about are people who are not in a team,
The So are you talking about the highlighted section or what I was just discussing?
what you're just talking about.
Oh yeah, yeah. So for example, if let's say you and I are publishers on a package, and then that package gets added to an org,
Mm,
and through that org membership and team membership of the package, Ben and Robin get added to it as well. Um, the and let's say Ben's the org admin. Ben can't remove you and I from the package through the org administration interface. The only way we can be removed is if somebody who has owner access explicitly npm owner removes on the command line. Um,
I see.
or possibly on the website, but like you have to be a publicly listed owner in order to remove individuals.
Got it. And these folks, I got it. And so these individuals were added to the package when it was assigned, when it was scoped to like an individual account, not
Correct.
an organization. I see. Got it.
Well, or
The,
like, and even when it's in an org, I think you can still explicitly add owners to a package that's not part of the org. Like org membership is not the exclusive way to add access. You can do either one. It's like there's two parallel and
oh,
overlapping privilege groups. One is explicit owners, and the other is implicit org team imbued owners.
got it. Okay, this is like a big gap that I have then because I didn't really pay much attention to the individual account permissions and I guess the conversion process from being going into an org itself. So this is actually a great
Yeah.
this
So
is
so when
actually a
I
great catch.
so when I did that for all the express packages, I looked at each package and I handled it by explicitly removing each person as I like at the same time as adding them to the team. I'm sure
Mm,
there's I don't remember which order I did, but like there's probably a window where no, they didn't have any access. But like I migrated them from being explicit to being imbued by the team for this exact reason. But you have to wait for them to accept the organization invite before you can do that. So there are a few people that I've not done that process yet because they haven't accepted the org invite. But like that the
got
in
it.
other words, the migrating an existing package into an org requires a bit more hand holding and care. Whereas if it's a new package or if it's a single maintainer package, it's really easy.
Oh my gosh, we have Darcy today. Like the authority on the topic that we're talking about right now. Hello, Darcy. Just wanted to say hi. It's nice seeing you. Happy New Year. Um, cool beans. So with that then, I think what you just called out is a really great catch. And so what I can do is go back and update the docs a little bit more around this part of the process itself. So yeah, thank you, Jordan. This was really, really good. I'd like to get your take on I know Chris had a chance to look at it too, and Darcy, since you're here, I'll share this doc again in chat. Um, to go through some of the best practices highlights that I kind of had to start, and get you, Chris, and Gravy, and get Darcy's perspective as well on which item, like the on what's in here, and see what we can do to like narrow down a little bit on what can actually become a compliance guideline. I have some thoughts, but I'd love to get yours as well. You got to hear Jordan before. Um, it'd be great if you could just quickly kind of go through the rest. I can talk through it with folks as well. Um,
I'll let you know as I if I have feedback as I read through it.
awesome, thank you.
I left one comment, which is because everyone has to be in the developers team, you shouldn't ever put any packages in it. You should always make a separate team for them. Yeah. And then also as there was a screenshot of the publishing access for a single package. Um, Unfortunately, NPM gives only three instead of four options there. It's down towards the bottom. Um, yeah, there. Oh, a little farther down. That right? The first screenshot. Yep. So the one that I want is require two-factor authentication or a granular access token and not an automation token. Because then I can do publishing from CI with a token, but that token won't have access to my entire NPM account, just that one package. Um, so that's like, it's not as safe as disallowing all tokens, but it's much safer than allowing automation tokens. But NPM doesn't offer that option, unfortunately. So I tend to select disallow tokens on every package. You're muted, by the way, Rod.
I see. So but automation, you would have to create the automation token yourself, of course, or someone else who has access to the package, correct?
Um, yes, like the automation token is like a token for your user account. So if you use an automation token, you are giving
Hmm.
like you're exposing your every package of yours to whoever hijacks that one CI
Yep,
environment. Whereas with the granular token, you're only exposing your access to one package, which is why you know, they should be the only kind of token. But yeah,
it is what it is, right? Gotcha.
yeah.
I see. So this is a good catch as well. Don't require.
And some of the like some of this is like a peanut gallery commentary that may be helpful as rationale in the document, but isn't like doesn't change the concrete advice.
Got it. Cool. So if we move on to the next tab, um, there's some high-level recommendations that we can put into the best practices guide. Excuse me, not the best practices guide. The that too, but the security compliance guideline. And I don't want to overwhelm the compliance guideline with a whole bunch of rules specific to NPM, even though that's exactly what we wound up doing with GitHub. So I wanted to get your all's philosophic take on a couple of entries. More like we can't add this. Well, the question is, how many entries can we really add to the compliance guideline without making it too big again or too detailed? We've gone into that granular first setting detail with GitHub, but we haven't done that with NPM yet. And so one of the big questions I have when looking at this list is like, what is the right level of detail to add to the guidelines around NPM?
Sorry, one quick question. Is there any expiry reference for tokens or recommendation for expiry?
Oh, no, there is not. Are there any settings around that within NPM itself, or are you talking about just a spreadsheet just to remember?
No, it's granular access tokens
Yeah.
Oh,
explicitly have expiry dates. So there's likely a recommendation that could be made here
oh yeah,
in
right here.
terms of, yeah. Okay.
I
I
mean,
set it
I
to
don't know
two
if
years, but I'm open-minded.
I mean I set mine to the year 9999 because I don't want to have to rotate my CI credentials repeatedly. Um, but like, so I don't know. I don't know if there's expiry seems like the sort of thing that when everyone loved it for passwords until everyone realized it made them like dramatically less secure. And um, I like maybe it's not quite the same for tokens, but it still kind of seems like it might be best to not make much of a recommendation there.
I feel like it's more in line with like security hygiene, like certificate renewal type. It is literally a chore for the sake of, rotation. Like it doesn't, I'm
Like
not
you
saying
should
it
be
provides a
periodically
ton of
auditing,
value.
but yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But
But
the expiry, if the purpose of expiry is to force you to audit, that's super annoying. Like I don't know if that has a lot of value. If there's more purpose, like in this case of of certificates, uh, expiry is important because of the like encryption keys involved, but the tokens don't have that.
yeah, well, it's also a signal if it's not a because there's no other way to tell whether or not you've generated a granular access token other than to have expiry. Like if you know what the token has permission to, that's great. But like from a validation or auditing standpoint, you don't necessarily know if what the provisions are potentially are if you're like because there's no like edit other than like name essentially for tokens.
Oh,
And with
you mean if the creator of the token didn't put that information in the name of the token, then you have no way of knowing what it's for. That's true.
and so because we're in this situation where there's two types of tokens that can be generated for npm and like GitHub, although GitHub has now added expiries to legacy tokens, just highlighting that npm unfortunately uses the classic tokens for login, and it's actually kind of dangerous to have login generate what is essentially a published token with no expiry. And so people accidentally generate many tokens that have this like very highly provisioned scope of tokens. And so you end up, if you've been on npm for a while, or if you're a maintainer, you potentially have generated a number of these tokens, and they're sitting there because you've run npm login, and they don't actually get evicted or
Mhm.
expired or removed from your account when you run logout. That's another funny you know part of this. So they're treated almost like web session tokens, but they're actually not that at all, and they don't get cleaned up and they
Right.
never get cleaned up. And so in terms of
Unless you
hygiene in
unless
this
you manually
space,
do it in the access tokens pane on the website.
right. So in terms of recommendations, I think the recommendation should always be that yes, you're creating granular access tokens with some expiry, even if it is, to your point, fine, a million years. To Red's point, he's already made a recommendation of 2 years. I think that's fine, just as long as there's something there. I was basically asking whether or not it existed a recommendation for this, but
Okay.
um, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to there being a recommendation. I just kind of was questioning the value, but I think that due to the current state of the way it all works, uh, everybody who has published access to a package should be frequently auditing their list of access tokens on npmjs.com just to make sure that what's in there is expected. But that's like not part of package management. That's just part of like managing access to your own account. I would also advise people to do the same for their GitHub account tokens. Just check into it every couple months.
What's the right iteration for that?
I mean, I don't know. Dealer's choice, really. How paranoid are you versus how much access do you have?
Well, what's the SOC compliance? What is it, like yearly?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Good question. Probably.
so like again, this could be just in line with whatever like SOC 2 type 2 compliance is, so that you're like, hey, that we're holding ourselves to a standard that's
Yeah.
yeah. And the reason for it is truly just purpose of auditing, purpose of
Mhm.
security, sanity. It doesn't have to be that like we're not saying that this makes you more secure, because it doesn't. It's we can't do anything to fix the poor, you know,
Right.
model,
It's more
access
like
control.
if you if your security has been breached or whatever, this is one way you might discover it by checking these lists.
100%. Or you might notice tokens that have not, like, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
I have talked to many people that don't realize, haven't even gone and looked at their access token list, and they see that they've got hundreds of tokens that's sitting there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know exactly how they got there. You've run npm login. And they're like, oh, but I've also run npm logout, or like I wouldn't expect that that login would create a never like an infinitely timed, never expiring token that has publish access, right? So, it's that's the scary part, is to, one, I think, push people into using granular access tokens on npm. That's a best practice. That's something that I think we should be pushing everybody to. And two, making sure that there's an expiry of those. And if it's annually or a little bit more, with some more buffer, like you should be maybe auditing them manually, but giving people 2 years of a buffer, like an expire of 2 years, gives you like that window of time to update or rotate them. I think it makes sense. So, anyways, that's a lot of. I didn't mean to go down a tangent.
Well, actually, Darcy, that is literally perfect in the exact purpose of this meeting. So you are 100% on track and on agenda right now. Cool. That was actually really great. So one of the things I took away from that conversation is that adding insight about the way npm login and logout behave regarding tokens is probably going to be a fun educational moment for a lot of folks. And so I'll be sure to add that into the docs. That's really, really good. Cool beans. So going back to kind of the higher level question of what actually belongs into it belongs in the compliance guidelines and what does not. Gotcha. Yeah. I'm just going to copy paste this into my notes, into the notes here, so I can.
Yeah, it does. One caveat to that note that I just gave is just it does remove it from your system. It doesn't make a
Mhm.
request to the server, to the registry, to revoke that token before it does that, though. And in fact, GitHub has a similar problem. If we're talking about GitHub publishing at all, which I don't think we are, it seems like it's focused to npm, but
Mhm.
who knows, some projects might decide that they want to distribute packages on the GitHub package registry. GitHub has a similar problem with their token management. And in some cases, it's actually way worse, because the GitHub client secret and ID are actually fully public and exposed. And so there's like a whole bunch of other issues that are around token management in GitHub. So
Sounds like so Darcy, when was the last time you had the read the pen test results for GitHub?
I mean, I can point you to it's actually in source code. Like the secret is available for everybody to use and abuse. And it's well known to the GitHub team. I manage that team, which is why I know this intimately.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, and I mean, I won't say anything bad about Gib security. They do an amazing job at a bunch of different things. Although, I mean, the repo was exposed at one point, like the GitHub repo was out there at one point. So I'm sure if you go looking, you could probably find the source code
Mhm.
and do some pen testing yourself if you want to. But
Awesome. Cool. So out of all the things that are here, Darcy, you weren't here for when we were making the compliance guidelines, but Jordan and Chris were. Um, I really appreciate your perspectives on how much should we really add to this. We wound up trying to really boil down the compliance guidelines quite a bit, and we still wound up with a large number of items. My fear of taking taking the approach that we did with GitHub and applying it to NPM, while it is mentally, well, it's like thematically consistent, I worry about the length and size of this list if we were to start doing this for more than just NPM and GitHub. Or maybe perhaps it's okay to go to this level of depth because really those are the heavy hitters we're really wanting to focus in on here.
Is the idea that this is like checklist worthy, so you can just quickly go through this and it becomes like a checklist?
Yeah, let me show you the checklist that we worked on last year. Uh, bring this up really quick.
And actually, is there any way we can automate some of this? So it goes from being not a checklist to something that's automated?
Yes,
Is there a
that is
scan,
actually
scan?
that is actually something separate that's going on, Darcy. So yes,
I
absolutely.
apologize. Haven't been here in a while, so I'm
Oh no, you're all good. No, I appreciate you being here, dude. You can be behind as much as you want. Yeah, so there's another project that is using this list to go to use the fundamental like scanning engine of OpenSSF's scorecard to add additional checks for these sorts of items and create a more ad hoc choose which checks you want to run kind of tool rather than just OpenSSF scorecards checks. And yeah, so this list is the basis for that work as well. And obviously, there's a number of things here, right here that reasonably can't ever be automated, but there are definitely a lot of things here that can be. And here, let me go and share this link here too as well. Sorry. So thoughts on length versus detail. Well, for I guess I'll share my opinion to get started. The idea of adding maybe three, four, five new rows to this um, doesn't doesn't like immediately raise alarms, but I want to make sure that that's not like that I'm not off base here by assuming that and thinking that way. Um, because it is already long, but a lot of the checks that we would be talking about going through for NPM are not. Um, the issue is that many folks may not have gone through their NPM settings as much as other settings and may not be as familiar with these. So if we add a whole bunch of new rows for this, then that just adds time to completing the checklist and potentially makes folks dig into parts of NPM settings that they're not as familiar with, which takes even more time. But maybe it's good that we have them do that while we're doing the compliance checklist, because if they're not familiar with it, then great. We're having them go through it for the first time and learning more about it. And then potentially there's like a security win in just having introducing these ideas to folks.
Yeah, I think the intent behind this compliance guide is like a articulation of all the things that we think are best practices. And so I would be hesitant to edit this because it's like too in depth or too long. Um, because it's a compliance guide. So I think um, putting all the things that we think are important in here is what we should do. Um, being really good about what things are recommendations and what things are requirements, I think helps. Um, but yeah, I think if we feel it's important, it should be in here. And if it makes this really long, then that means that there's a lot of things that we think are important.
Thoughts from the audience. Thank you for that input, Ben. I think that was good perspective.
Sorry, I'm still catching up. So Are you saying that the concern is just adding more items to this list? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
okay, but I mean, relatively speaking, if you're adding like three more things to a list of like 30 things, like you're growing by 5-10%, like it's like a tax. It's like it's fine. It's
I mean, I
like
think
it's
the thing that makes a long list overwhelming is that it's just this big ass list. Um, it's my guess is that once we're done with the list, if someone reworks it into more of a step-by-step how-to guide or a like, narrative, that it will be more consumable, and then we won't have to worry as much about the length. In other words, like most people, this list has to exist, but most people aren't going to take this list and then try and check off each of 100 items or whatever. They're going to be like, I'm going to go to the repo settings and click these 12 boxes. And then I'm going to go to my NPM settings and click these 12 boxes. And like, that'll take care of 80 items, or, you know what I mean? Like the actual process of complying with the list is much simpler than enumerating the items.
yeah. I mean, I just put in chat that like it seems like these things are broken down into types or domains. And so like I can see you just grouping these by section by the domain. And so you have like 5 to 10 items in each one of these domains. And it's like you can just like address or tackle one domain at a time. You're like, okay, like I got user authentication all figured out. Great. Get a check mark for that. Like next up is user account permissions or whatever, right?
Awesome. Well, I appreciate y'all's thoughts on this because I don't want to just be here in my own head. So I appreciate the calibration and discussion on this. So with that said, then, um, in terms of items that could become, all of these bullets could theoretically become compliance checklist items. Some of them, they could be obviously, they weren't exactly written perfectly for the purpose to start because I want to just get the idea down. But frankly, most of these items could theoretically be added to the list. So I guess rather than asking the question of which of these should be on the list, instead, which of these don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to be on the list. There's also some, uh, you know, Jordan, you just mentioned how you don't um, use the automation, you don't allow for use of tokens at all, basically. I'm sure there are some that do, and so we need to leave room for
Mhm.
that. And so gate
Totally.
logic, logic like this, one of the pieces of feedback on the list, on the checklist that we got was that maybe if or logic doesn't really go very well, like if you're in this situation, you should do this, or you're in this situation, you should do that. Um, so
I
I'm
mean,
not sure. Go
like,
ahead.
I think it's not bad, but like I mean, by the way, I would reword this to say publishing from CI or not, because there's not really any other kind of automation that's important. But like I think that the best once how we decide these guidelines is one process. I think worrying about how to make them consumable can be different, and so this sort of if
Mhm.
or thing is fine, even if there's like 50 if or checks. But like when we then after this is finished, then when we do another phase to try and make it more consumable, we might do something like here's the guide if A, here's the
Mm,
guide if B, and then you have much more concise, easy to follow things because you've already answered that question, sort of like a wizard setup. Um, is that like I think that a lot of these are going to be bucketed into like, um, do you publish from CI or not? Do you have a monorepo or not? Do you, are your packages owned by a company or not? Things like that. And those types of questions are going to, I think, drastically reduce branching after that.
cool. Thanks, Jordan. Darcy?
Are we saying that's okay to have automation tokens?
No.
Okay.
This is explicitly saying migrate from legacy tokens, which are automation tokens, to legacy here, actually.
Yeah, it's just there's no way to allow a granular token and also disallow a automation token.
Right. I'm just
That's all.
wondering, like, if we are explicitly like that to me is if I was to prioritize things, this would be like the number one thing that I would prioritize in terms of like people to do is to remove any all other types of tokens and move to granular access tokens that are explicitly for a specific package that have an expiry. And you can test for this, like you can test the token itself if you have access to the token, what its permissions are, but that's unlikely that you'll be able to automate this necessarily. So it truly comes down to like, you just hope that people are doing this because there is no way to gate it, like Jordan said. So, but this is the number one thing that I would say is going to bite people, is like extremely permissive permissions tokens.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you can get everybody just to do this, that's like a huge one.
Oh, that's I appreciate the perspective on that. That's really good to know. And I think we're at nearly time for the meeting. So I think with this perspective in mind, I can go finish up what I'm working on. Darcy, Jordan, please feel free to hack at the document asynchronously, just using comments. I will be responsive and continuing to go through this doc. And now that we've talked about it, I'm going to convert this to just slightly more cleaned up language so I can put it into the spreadsheet. So as I do that, I really would appreciate your thoughts and input. So thank you very much, folks. And Darcy, thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it. So in the 5 minutes we have left, just wanted to see if there are any other items that folks wanted to discuss before we hop off for the week. Oh, all right. Cool beans. Well, I guess with that, then I can give you all 5 minutes back, and looking forward to seeing you all in the doc more as I polish up the phrasing around this. So thank you for today, guys. It may not seem like a lot, but for me, like the perspective really does help just center me and give me confidence that we're on the right track. So thank you for that.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Sweet. Take care, folks.
Bye.
All right,
Bye.
bye.